That was great. So I was adjusting the microphone, it came off in my hand and off the belt. While I'm adjusting this, because I can multitask, I need to remind everyone that there is a special called business meeting for tonight. We would like to discuss the licensing of Tim Balsam into the gospel ministry, and we'll present all that information tonight. So tonight at 5:20, a special called business meeting. Also, as you're turning to Mark chapter 10, Easter's just coming up around the corner, and I have seen the amount of eggs, and I have seen the amount of candies, and the Easter bunny is going to be light this year. So if we could help out the Easter egg hunt by providing eggs and candy or the funds to make that happen, that would be great. If you could see your way clear or led in that direction by God to do so. Matthew chapter 10. Matthew chapter 10 is where we're going to begin. And while you're turning there, I will drink from a glass of water. Matthew chapter 10, starting in verse 32. Mark, where's he in Matthew chapter 10? Yeah, can you believe that? My goodness. It's the beard, it's weighing on my mind. Wait for it, it'll catch up for the rest of you here in a minute. Mark chapter 10. Now I'm going to call him Matthew the whole time and he'll be confused. Mark chapter 10, starting in verse 32. Yeah, that would have been a whole new sermon series, right? And they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were amazed. And those who followed were fearful. And again, he took the 12 aside and began to tell them what was going to happen to him, and saying, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and they will deliver him to the Gentiles, and they will mock him, they will spit upon him, they will scourge him, they will kill him, and 3 days later he will rise." And James and John, the two brothers of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said, "Grant us that we may sit that we sit us in your glory, to sit on your right and on your left hand." And Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup I drink? Are you able to, or be baptized with the baptism I am about to be baptized?" And they said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you shall drink. And you shall be baptized with the baptism in which I am baptized. But to sit at my right or at my left is not mine to give, but is for those whom it has been prepared." And hearing this, the 10 began to feel indignant with James and John, and calling them to himself, Jesus said, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. But it is not so among you, but whoever wishes to become great shall be a servant, and whoever wishes to be the first among you shall be a slave to all. And even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and he gave his life as a ransom for many." All right, pick up here in Mark chapter 10, verse 32. And actually, if you go back and read 31, the phrase, that part of the chapter ends with, "But the many who are first will be last, and the last will be first." Sandwiched between this thought and the Son of Man coming is more identification, more revelation, more explanation of what is going to happen when Jesus goes to Jerusalem. And then the disciples miss it again. See the great tragedy of this. Notice how it begins. They're walking along, they're amazed at his teaching. Jesus comes and pulls them aside and says, "Look, further revelation." This is the fourth time Jesus has revealed to the disciples in the last 3 chapters that he is coming to die. And notice the response from the disciples. Yeah, that's cool. Anyhow, Jesus, back to where we were supposed to be. You can't get any clearer than the description that Jesus gives us about the coming of his death. Notice what he says. The Son of Man, once we get to Jerusalem, is going to be delivered. Now, he doesn't tell them by one of his own. Betrayed internally by one of his own. To the chief priests and scribes, the individuals he's been warning them about while they were in the boat, saying, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, the scribes, and the Herodians, and they're wondering whether or not they've got enough bread to get them across the shore. Be delivered over to these individuals. They will condemn me to death. Now the problem is, they can't execute. And here's the first reference to the Gentiles. To the Gentiles, basically to the Roman authorities. And then we see the process of the Passion event. They will mock him. They will spit upon him. They will scourge him. They will kill him. And 3 days later, he will rise again. You can't get any clearer than what Jesus is expressing to his disciples about what is going to happen to the Son of Man when they get to Jerusalem, and yet they go, well, that's kind of cool. No, don't understand that. See, a lot of this language is coming from 53 of Isaiah. You won't find the exact terminology there, but the imagery from Isaiah 53 is being prophesied by Jesus here in Mark. And notice what happens. Upon hearing that, Peter does this. Jesus says he's coming to die, and Peter says, oh, Lord, you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you've been out in the sun too long. It's back in chapter 8. And Jesus renounces Peter right there on the spot, because he knows Peter knows what he's talking about. Immediately after saying that, James and John, two of the inner three. Now, the story of James and John is recorded in Matthew, and in Matthew's account, James and John's mommy asks. Doesn't matter. James and John are the root behind the issue. Mark records them. James and John ask Jesus, that's cool, but hey, we have a question, and we want you to grant for us anything we want first. It's like when your friend calls you, and when you own a truck, you have friends. You have friends you don't know you have. There we go. Hey, what you doing Saturday? I don't know. What do you need moved Saturday? I had to start asking that because I had friends I didn't know I had. Hey, a friend of mine needs to move a... No. Well, what do you... Doesn't matter. But no. What? No. Aren't you watching TV? No. And I'm going to try to speak fast because the Red Wings are playing at noon, and so I'm a hockey guy, so if you listen fast... No, I'm kidding. So James and John come to Jesus with this cryptic question. Now, Jesus has just told them the events that are going to occur in what we call Holy Week. And their response to it is, well, we would like to sit one on your right and one on your left when your kingdom comes into glory. Forgetting the part that the first shall be last and the last shall be first, and the Son of Man is coming to die and then will rise again, they are seeking positions of authority in Jesus' kingdom while missing the point of the purpose of Jesus' coming. Have you ever seen the movie Milo and Otis? Any of y'all with little kids, Milo and Otis? Yeah, Milo and Otis? No? For those of you who haven't watched it, if you've got grandkids, watch it. It's a great movie to sleep through. I've gotten some of my... I actually finally watched it for the first time all the way through the other day, and my kids have watched it probably since 2010. And I usually, somewhere along the line of the cat getting into the box, into the rivers, we usually went... Anyhow, the only part that I really know really well is at the very beginning, and this is when Milo the cat is born. And Milo the cat is born, and he falls out of the loft, and he runs into a pug-nosed dog named Otis. And he looks at Otis, and he says, well, you're a strange-looking cat. To To which Otis responds, I'm not a cat. I'm a dog. I'm a dog. I'm a dog. Right, you're a dog. But deep down, you're really a cat. No, well, I'm a dog. Right. But deep down, you're really a cat, right? No, I'm a dog. It's like when I go onto certain pages and do debate, my name kind of gives people an odd sense of, it gives them an odd understanding of who I really am. And every now and then I'll get verses quoted that women should remain silent in church. To which then I reply with, dude, I'm a guy. And then that guy goes away. What happens is they hear this statement, and then they look and go, yeah, you're coming to die. But when your kingdom's here, let me be in charge. No, I'm coming to die. Yeah, I got you, come to die. I've got it. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, don't know what to do with it. So anyhow, when your kingdom gets here, can I help you run it? I've come to die. Yeah, I got that. I know you keep saying this weird thing. Last week we discussed what it meant to rise from the dead, and we still couldn't quite comprehend that. So, yeah, that's cool. But we want to sit at your right and left hand when your kingdom comes in. Yeah. I'm coming to die and then to raise again from the dead. We know you're not fitting our theology, so when you fit our theology, let us rule with you. It doesn't get any clearer. He gives more revelation about what's going on, and they're trucking right past it. Folks, the Bible gets very clear about the way we are to live, and a lot of times we truck right past it. See, they are looking for positions of authority in God's kingdom. And notice what Jesus says to them. Notice what he says. And notice the sheer arrogance of their position. You don't know what you're asking. And do you think they really knew what they were asking at this point? I mean, Peter kind of does the same kind of thing. Lord, these other chumps, they're going to leave you. But I'll be right there, mister. I got a sword but can't hit a dude in the head with it. I mean, it's not hard to swing a sword, but yet Peter was, mechanically challenged and missed. Hit a dude in the ear. I've seen soldiers like that. The safest place in front of them when they're shooting is in front of them. Don't move, you'll run into it. Just stand there and look right at them. They'll shoot around you. I don't know. There's this movie where people were slinging bullets around things. I saw it at one point. I think that's what they think they do with an M16. If they sling it, it'll go around people. That's not how bullets work. Do you know, you do not know what you're asking for. Oh, yeah, we do. We want to sit at your right and left hand. No, I'm coming to die. I'm going to be scourged. I'm going to be mocked. I'm going to be spat upon. Yeah, we can handle that. Yep. Yeah, it's like that tough talk at basic training at the holding area, and then when they actually meet that round brown, how the tears start flowing. Oh, I want to be here. Too bad. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? Or to be baptized with the baptism I am baptized? There's a lot of discussion a while back about what baptism is. This is not talking about baptism for salvation. A couple weeks ago, we talked about how the Jews would take their cups and their pots and dip it into water. The terminology there is baptize. This comes from the Greek word bapto, which means to dip in something. That's what it means, dip in water typically. And Jesus is basically saying, the cup of which I drink and the baptism of which I will be engulfed in is something that is all painful and so consuming. Are you capable of drinking from the cup that I'm about ready to drink from? The suffering and the anguish and the pain that I will take upon myself, are you capable of doing that? And are you willing to be overwhelmed with the with the anguish that comes with that? And their response is an arrogant, well, yeah. Yeah, sure, why not? There's a lack of understanding of the purpose of the Christ. Blinded by an ambition for power. That's what happened. Let us sit at your right and your left hand. That's what positions of honor and power are. They wish to be in positions of high authority. Why? Well, they were the inner three. Jesus took them to when they went to heal Jairus' daughter. Jesus pulled them aside and gave them this revelation first. They were the cool kids. The other guys were just hangers-on. They were the entourage. They're the part of the zombie team you have just to get away. Right? If you're into that stuff. And Jesus said to them, and they said, we were able. And Jesus said to them, the cup of which I drink, you shall drink. And you shall be baptized with the baptism which I am baptized with. James dies a martyr's death. Peter is executed upside down in Rome. John dies in exile on the island of Patmos. The disciples die horrific deaths, exception of John. They drink and suffer the sufferings of Jesus Christ. But they didn't realize it when they said yes. They did soon after. And hearing this, the 10, feeling indignant with James and John, called him out. Now, wouldn't you feel the same way? If you're one of the hangers-on, if you're one of the entourage, and you're in with the 12, and all of a sudden 2 of them have enough guts to go, hey, Jesus, let us sit at the only 2 places of pride of place that is capable. Now, Jesus says, no, I can't give this to you. This is for the prepared. Hebrews tells us who it's prepared for. The Son sits at the right hand of the Father, which means who sits on His left? It would be the Father. The other is not for Him to give. That's not His place to put them there. They don't get that special privilege, which is what they're seeking, like you would find amongst the Gentiles. Because they're not God. They're not deity. They're not here to take away the sins of the world through His death, burial, and resurrection. They miss the purpose of His coming, which is selfless service. Notice what He says. Notice what He says. You know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. But it's not so among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you shall be a slave to all. Now notice what he says. Look, you have seen how the Gentile rulers have run this land. You know how they run their government. And they lord it over you. How many of you ever worked for a boss? And how many of you ever worked for a leader? And you say, well, those are the same. No, if you've worked for a boss, you know the difference between a boss and a leader. The Gentiles prefer the boss method. This is the way it is. This is how it's going to be. The Gentiles do that. The Gentiles take their position and use it to abuse people. They use their position of authority, or they scheme for positions of authority, or they reach for positions of authority they're not supposed to, and they use that position to lord it over their subjects. Go look at the king through history, through England, through France. Go look at church history when the popes and the church began to gain great power, and the abuses that were done in the name of Jesus Christ against the people who claim the name of Jesus Christ. Because they were not looking for the purpose of service. They were looking for how best does this help me? And see, this is common. Everyone struggles with this. It is that tiny little voice in the back of our head says, you deserve this, go do it. We've all worked for someone that has had this position. We've all seen people that do this. Churches are full of folks. And I say churches, I'm not talking this church, I'm talking churches universal. We've either seen the pastor who has come in and is the absolute dictator and the oppressor, and he is the boss. And what he says goes. Or you see the church that have people in it that go and do things to where they are the boss and what they say goes. Why? The same reason why you have abuse of authority in military, the same reason why you have abuse of authority in police departments, the same reason why you have abuse of authority in governmental systems is the same reason why you have abuse of authority within churches amongst the people and amongst the clergy. Why? Because we are all people that are selfish, fallen individuals, and we are saved by the grace of God. And what happens is we begin looking for a position of authority instead of a position of service. And that's where the rub comes. Imagine what a great message the church would have if they put service of others first. But notice what James and John did. They sought for themselves first, and then everyone else to follow. They missed the purpose of Jesus' coming. Jesus' coming does not serve himself. Think about it. It does not serve deity to die in any purpose other than the salvific plan that God lays out. And that's what Jesus says. Notice what Jesus says here. Check it out. Whoever wishes to be first among you shall be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom to many. I as deity. And see, this is what we got to remember. When Jesus talks about coming to be served and to serve, there's no one greater than Jesus. He, the Father, and the Holy Spirit are co-equal, co-eternal in all things. There's no one greater. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. He could have been served by the Emperor of the Roman Empire because he is a true deity. He could have looked at every one of the situations he dealt with and simply scoffed at them and gone on and been right in doing so. Why? Because who are you going to argue with? He is a God. And notice what our God says about us and the position of servitude. I did not come to be served. I could have come and lorded my position over you. I could have come and abused my position and abused you with it. And you couldn't have done a thing about it. But instead, I came and served. This goes back to Sunday night, last Sunday night. If you weren't here, you ought to show up. We're going to a little sermon why Jesus comes to die. And in Philippians chapter 2, it tells us that Christ, though did not see equality with the Father something to be grasped, i.e., he did not see his pride of place in heaven something to hold on and retain, took on the form of a human and humbled himself and came in obedience to the Father to the point of death. That is serving one another. When we begin seeking our own way, that's not. When we begin looking for means by which we can obtain power, that's not. When we come looking for means by which we can build a bigger kingdom, that is not. I know pastors, that's their sole goal. I want to get a church to this size, and then once it gets that far, I'm going to send my resume out, and then I'm going to get a church to the next size, and then when it gets to that size, I'm going to send my resume out, and I'm going to get to the church to that size, and I'm going to do it. But okay, rock on. You've now indicated what you're about with your mouth. We know folks like that. We know folks in our jobs like that. They are backstabber. We were talking about this in Sunday school. The model in business is how you get ahead is you get information on people and then you stab them in the spine with it. You find out weaknesses and then you move ahead. Or you dig onto some folks and you utilize that. It's all about getting ahead regardless of the cost. And the fact of the matter is, Jesus' model takes that model and turns it on its head. Because it says, I, being God, who could have spoke you all out of existence because you are deserving of ultimate wrath. Unless, folks, we think that we're something good about us that makes God save us, there ain't nothing good about any of us. That's what makes grace so wonderful. We are all corrupt things. And the God of heaven sends His Son to the world to come and die for the very things that are deserving of death. That is ultimate service. Think of how radical our church and the church universal, the church in America's mission capability would be if that was our model. And here's the thing, folks. I'd like to tell you I knock this out of the park on a weekly basis, but if you follow me down the road, you will see at times a guy who gets very upset at people who can never hear him. My wife is giggling because she gets to hear me. How many of us have been in line and watched people try to edge in, and then we push that shopping cart forward because, hey, there's a line. This isn't the back of it. Right? I've done it. I've done it in other areas that I would say that I would be proud of, but I'm not. Think of how radical the concept of the church would be if we actually followed the model that Jesus did. I possessing all power, I possessing that of deity, I possessing total authority, can crush you with a thought. Think about this, folks. The deity that could crush us with a thought, not even a thought, comes to serve us through death so that we can be seen as redeemed. He ransoms us back. His death pays a ransom to the Father, which sets us free. He ransoms us back when we don't deserve it. Think about that awesome concept right there. And the concept of what service really means. It is to place the needs of someone else ahead of yours. Political aspirations, someone else ahead of yours. Think about how radical our political system would be if we quit trying to chop people down for what they might have hidden way back in a closet somewhere 40 years ago when someone made a kid cry in elementary school. If I ever ran for political offices, there's tons of kids I've shoved into lockers that are going to come out and rat me out. And there's people that shove me in lockers that I'll rat them out. Think about how radically different our political system would be if we would do that. And yet, this is an area we struggle with. This is an area the disciples struggle with. Notice what happened. After hearing Jesus telling them, I'm coming to die and going to rise again, they immediately go to, well, let us have a position of authority. It's common. It's there. We fight against it. Sometimes we fight and we're successful. Sometimes we fight and we lose. But the fact of the matter is, our purpose and our goal should be that of the mind of Christ, where our actions are putting the work of others ahead of the work of our own. They're putting the interests of others ahead of the interests of our own. The interests of other folks instead of the selfish interests of ourselves. Otherwise, we become nothing more than clanging gongs. And here's the thing. I would love to tell you I knocked this out of the park, but there are days that I do not. And that's not to say, well, you know, the pastor does it, therefore I get a pass. No, it's to tell you that even the man of God that stands before you preaching is also a fallen man of God who stands before you preaching and is susceptible to the exact same things that you are. And while I still have the obligation to the next day get up, dust off, and move forward. These two men are men of God. They go on to shape the world as the other 12 do. And they screw up here. Think of the radical nature of salvation. Deity. God Himself, in the second person of the triune God, comes to earth and takes on the form of a man. Willingly goes to Jerusalem. Could have said, I'm not going to Jerusalem. This is what's going to happen in Jerusalem. We're going to go to Tarshish. The Son of Man is going to go to Jerusalem. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed. The Son of Man is going to be handed over to the chief priests and to the scribes. He is going to be condemned to death. He is going to be put to death by the Gentile authorities. He is going to be mocked, scourged, beaten, spat upon, and he will die. And on the third day he will rise again to ransom you back. It's an amazing concept of God's love and God's willingness to go to the utmost for those things that are undeserving of His utmost, and yet that is what He demonstrates with us. If you were here today and you've never heard this love that God has for you by the sending of the Son into the world to die for you. In a moment when the praise band comes to sing, I'll have my mic turned off. I'd like to sit and talk to you about what it means further about this sacrificial love that Christ has for those in whom He's come to die for. You're here today and you've been coming to Skyline for a while. You say, today would be a great day to join. I'd like to offer the opportunity again. I'll have the microphone turned off. At the time, the praise band will come forward. If you will please stand with me. Would mind being seated? This is Tim Bossum. If you haven't figured that out already, he's the guy that sings up there on the stage.
One of us.
One of them, yes. You play the guitar.
That's right.
And the beard.
And the beard.
And the beard.
Expert on that.
Tim has come to me a while back and said that he would like to go on to seminary and Bible college to become a minister in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the deacons and I sat with him and talked to him about what that means in the process of licensing him. And so Tim has come forward to make his statement known that he is seeking Skyline's blessing, which is why we're having our call business meeting this evening, to be licensed by us into the gospel ministry. So Tim has come forward to make his public profession known. So as we close out in prayer, if Christina will come forward and stand with him, because no minister stands alone. He always has a wife rolling her eyes behind him. As we close out with prayer, as you cycle through, if you will please congratulate Tim into his call for gospel ministry, and then tonight we'll vote to affirm that in our meeting tonight. So, Brother Walter, if you'll close us out with a word of prayer.